Our guest today is Andre Relis. He is the director of a brand new Randy Rhoads documentary called Reflections of a Guitar Icon. I think I got that title right. Andre, and I hope I got his last name right as well, Andre joins us live right now. Andre, did I get your name and the film correct?
You got it all right, my man. Thanks for having me.
It's good to hear. Nice to have you on. I watched the film. I enjoyed it. My question to you is this, and I was talking about this with the audience earlier. There has been talk and discussion forever about a Randy Rhoads documentary. Some start, stop, who's doing one, who's not, who did one, it got shelved. What is the origins of your film? Because clearly there's some stuff in there that is archival and maybe some stuff that was new. Can you talk about this project overall, how you got involved and what the history is of it?
Yeah, this was a unique situation because I kind of had a template to start off with. There's a gentleman named Ron Sobel who produced a documentary in 2012. I think it was 2012. It was Randy Rhoads' the Quiet Riot years. And we became friends, and he never got a real release on that documentary. And so I worked out a deal with him where I was able to license some of the material from there, and then I just built all around it. So it was a definite unique situation.
Was there a competing documentary at one point that was also in production?
No, I mean, as I got into this deeper and deeper, I started to find out that there had been other documentaries. There was a Dakota Films one around 2008, 2009, and speaking to the parties that had been working on that, it sounded like that got canned, like, right towards the end. And I started to realize that there was a very difficult journey ahead of me to get this documentary out, and there's certain forces that don't want it out there, so I got it out.
Why is it, for the fan who's just a Randy Rhoads fan, and it's obviously long overdue and deserved for there to be something for Randy out there, why is it so difficult? And where is the blocking forces come from? Like, who doesn't want it done? The family, Ozzy and Sharon, like where are the roadblocks to this being done in the way that maybe it could have been done much easier a long time ago?
I mean, I do believe the family is very protective of it, and they had ideas early on about what they wanted. It appears to me, I wasn't around when these earlier documentaries were in production. I wasn't around in the sense that I wasn't involved with them. I had nothing to do with the earlier ones, and it appears that there was difficulties from the Osbourne side too to license music, and beyond that, I really don't know, man. It's a weird one, and that's actually what really intrigued me, because my specialty as a producer is to get stuff out that a lot of people have a hard time getting out, whether it be a feature film or a documentary or whatever it may be. There's been quite a few projects I've honed in on and got stuff done that a lot of people before me couldn't.
I was going to ask you about that. What is your background in terms of being a filmmaker? And I'm assuming you're a big fan of Randy's, which was the passion for you for this?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a musician. Well, I still am a musician. You're never supposed to say you used to be, but I was in a touring band for 10 years before I got in the film business. And it was a big changeover when I got in the film business. I went from being on the road touring, that kind of lifestyle, to sitting behind a desk. And I got discouraged with the fact that once I got into the business world of things, I didn't have time to play music anymore. So I launched the music division in 2003, 2004 called Vision Music, that's just purely dedicated to music-based documentaries, biopics, series, anything to do with it, to be able to get that creative side out. And my first movie I did was I produced a movie, a biopic on Darby Crash, What We Do is Secret, which was a movie about the germs.
Mm-hmm. So I'm a huge fan of music documentaries, so I'd love to see some of your other stuff. You mentioned you were in a touring band. Anybody that we'd know?
My band was Rubberneck. We were, we were a Southern California punk band. Did the Warped Tour, a lot of the, SoCal Fat Records, Epitaph Sound. We never really broke through, but I spent a lot of time trying.
So, Andre, that's interesting. So, was this more of a challenge for you and something you wanted to get out and felt needed to be out, or did you approach it more from that angle, or are you a Randy fan? Because obviously, being a punk guy and with a punk background, not a genre of music known for guitar heroes, obviously, or amazing lead guitar playing. So, where did you personally land on this?
The funny thing is, when I say punk, we did have influence. So there was, like, all my guys in my band were into Judas Priest, early Ozzy, and so there was definitely a metal star music. But honestly, why I got really interested in this is I've always considered Randy Rhoads an enigma. He's a legend, but to many, including myself, even when I was in a band, I remember thinking of him as just immortal, amazing guitarist that was, Blizzard of Oz, Dire Madman, amazing albums, but I didn't know much about him. I feel like his legacy's kind of gotten buried along the way, and he's a mysterious character, and I wanted to be part of getting that out, particularly 40 years after. I was hoping to release it a month and a half ago so that we could do it on, around the 40-year anniversary of when he passed, but we got it out close enough.
Did you ever get a chance to see him play, or were you too young?
No, I was too young, man. I was too young. But I do remember the early Ozzy. I was in the metal when I was young, before I got into punk. And I remember just those Ozzy albums just being, like, so intense. When I was listening to him in early Motley Crue, and I just, it always stuck with me. And the Randy Rhoads side of it, and his playing was just something that, like I say, it was almost on a higher plateau.
So what would you say, Andre, was for you? It sounds like you've pieced this together from some different sources. When you came into it and got involved and went with Ron's, and I know Ron, and Ron did a book on Quiet Riot, and I know Ron's in the film. When you got involved in this, what was the biggest challenge for you? Was it assembling it all? Was it clearing it all legally? Was it finding out what you could and couldn't present? I mean, tell me through that process what was the biggest difficulty?
Well, basically, there was pieces of the Sobel doc that I licensed, so we didn't utilize this whole documentary. We used pieces of it. What I really wanted to do was explore more of the aftermath when he left Quiet Riot and moved into the Ozzy and moved in with Ozzy and started his solo career. I wanted to concentrate on that more and then just get into his legacy and bring in other guitarists. I really wanted to show how he influenced such a huge influence on so many metal guitarists and your average Joe who's picking up the guitar.
One of the things that I loved about the film, because I'm an East Coast guy, and I was talking earlier to my audience about this, unless you lived in Southern California and grew up at that time of Quiet Riot, you probably didn't know much about Quiet Riot because they didn't break onto the scene until after Randy passed away on a national level. Yeah. And I found all the Quiet Riot stuff and the rise of that band and their impact in Southern California and in the clubs, which nobody would really understand unless they lived there at that time. I found that really interesting, and to me, that seems to be the bigger portion of the film, which I was fine with because the Ozzy stuff is pretty well documented. That period of time is not so much, and some of the footage in there, the early stuff of them playing at the Starwood, and some of the photos I had never seen before. So can you talk a little bit about the focus on that particular period of Randy's earliest years and those early years of Quiet Riot?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really covered the early years of Quiet Riot, and is one of the most interesting things I think is that he spent so many years struggling musician, which I could relate to, playing the Sunset Strip, very similar to what I was doing, and also just not getting the record company's attention. And that one thing that I'm really proud of showcasing is the two early Quiet Riot albums, Quiet Riot 1977, Quiet Riot 78. I think those are incredible albums. I just can't believe that they never got a record deal in the States for those. And I actually believe they're the better albums than the latter years when they finally broke through.
What I found interesting, and you covered this in the documentary, is, and I had no idea about this, they were doing unbelievable business in the clubs. They could not get a record deal.
Yeah.
And they ended up actually having, and you have the person from their fan club in there talking about this at the time, they actually organized a picket, and they went around and put and picketed in front of all the record companies to sign Quiet Riot in Los Angeles. And then they put it out to the press to try to get some media coverage, but everything was like a half an hour behind, so it never really lined up to the last one. But they, obviously this is long before the internet and social media and all of that, but the fan club actually went along with the band and campaigned on the street in front of the major labels to sign Quiet Riot.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I also wanted to break through with this doc is, you have a talent like Rhoads, and of course the rest of the band was too, but I mean, Randy Rhoads sticks out. He's one of the most legendary guitar players of all time. Couldn't get a record deal for how many years, having to pick record companies, couldn't get signed. Even after that, they didn't get signed. And I think that is really important for a lot of musicians out there who are on the road to make it, how it is, and that there's a similar stories out there with Randy, who couldn't get, and just the perseverance, you got to stick to it, man.
Hey, Andre, I'm going to do a quick break here, and I'm going to put you on hold a second because your phone's breaking up. We're going to see if we can clean up your phone a little bit during the break and come back and talk to you for a few more minutes, if that's okay. All right, we're going to put you on hold. Let's go to a break right now, and Joel, see if we can, while he's on hold, if we can clean up his phone, if he can get a better connection, because he was cutting out a little bit. We'll come right back talking more Randy Rhoads, hopefully on a cleaner line with Andre Relis, director of the new film, Randy Rhoads, Reflections of a Guitar Icon. We'll be right back on Trunk Nation. All right, we'll see if we got Andre on a better line here. We're talking about the Randy Rhoads documentary, which is now out, called Reflections of a Guitar Icon. Andre is the director of it. Andre, so going back to this Quiet Riot period for Randy, I know there's some footage in here that had not been seen before, or some rare stuff. I'm not deep into the bootleg world and things that have been out there and what have you, but what is, from that period, what is some of the stuff in the documentary that maybe is the most rare or never seen footage?
I mean, I believe that a lot of the stuff about his teaching and how he was playing all this Van Halen music and, just showing all the footage from what he was teaching, so you can hear him playing it, and, all the stuff about his musical school. I also think that, there's some incredible footage with his early bandmates, taking us on a journey that a lot of people didn't know took place with the band, in the stories about Kelly Garney and what happened with him. I mean, there's a lot.
The Eddie Van Halen stuff I found real interesting. There's an audio clip of Eddie talking about Randy in there. There is also there was absolutely a rivalry at that time between the two of them, and that is laid out in the documentary. Can you talk about that a little bit? And was that something you were aware of before you made the film?
No, I really wasn't. It's actually something that I learned more of as I got into it. I didn't know much about a rivalry at all, but from from those that were there, the story is that Van Halen and Eddie used to come check out Randy quite a bit and watch him play, and there seemed to be some sort of competition between Randy and Eddie. I think that Eddie, in my opinion, thought of Randy as a threat, and just seemed to be, as you can see from the audio of Eddie talking about, Eddie believes that he ripped his style off. And, on the Quiet Riot side and Randy's side, I don't believe that they thought that was just bogus. So, that being said, we covered as much as we could on the Van Halen stuff, but, I try and keep it, I try and keep it surface as much as possible and not go too deep unless I have all the information that I feel real comfortable at releasing.
I mean, there's the thing talked about where Randy, when he played, he really played right to the audience at that time and showed the audience exactly what he was doing on the fretboard, where Eddie at that time, both of them played these big parties in Southern California, but Eddie Van Halen at that time was known for actually putting his back to the crowd because he didn't want to reveal how he was doing things. So they had two very different approaches where Randy would present to the audience and say, look what I'm doing, and good luck trying to copy it. Eddie was more secretive about it, just listen and try to figure out what I must be doing with my fingers. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think that, on the Randy side, that comes from being a teacher and growing up in a music school and just wanting to teach people. I mean, when you do watch the way in which Randy Rhoads stood on stage and the way in which he, focused on the audience and showing them his finger licks, he was definitely teaching and sharing. As far as, Eddie Van Halen, obviously they came from different worlds, different backgrounds. I think the notion was that Eddie was more of a, kind of rock star, a little bit more arrogant, and Randy, on the other hand, was not.
What's incredible, which I didn't know until your film, was that Van Halen and Quiet Riot only ever played one show and shared the bill together, and it was at an auditorium in Glendale, and there was a discussion, and it almost didn't happen because they were arguing over which band was going to headline and close the show, and Van Halen ended up getting signed like the week prior, and because Van Halen went in as a signed band, they ended up closing.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And one thing that's really cool is there's some footage of that show. Right. And you can see Randy Rhoads is just, because of the rivalry, I believe it fueled even more of his showmanship. And so you see Randy just bursting out and just showing his guitar solos in a way that I hadn't seen before. And yeah, there was definitely a rivalry, and I think that the fact that they got signed was also one thing I didn't get into. Was there was a lot of, I did get into it, but there was a lot of pain and sorrow over the fact they couldn't get signed, and even at that time they were good friends with the Dickies, Ron Sobel's brothers in the Dickies, and they got signed, and they were a pretty simple punk band, so. Yeah, the trials and tribulations of the early Quiet Riot years were real, and a lot of bands go through that.
Yeah, the other thing is that you can't, in retrospect, when you look back on it and you think, well, the guy had the choice of leaving Quiet Riot and joining Ozzy, the singer in Sabbath. That's a no-brainer. Not really, especially at that time, because what you get the sense of in the film is Quiet Riot was Randy's band, and they did have a huge following in Southern California, even though they weren't signed. And the idea of him leaving to go to Ozzy, who at that time was considered a washed-up drug addict that didn't have a chance at having success, that was a really fine line as to whether he should do it or not. And you have some archival footage in there with Kevin Dubrow. That really hurt the Quiet Riot guys that he made that decision. But what I had no idea about was after he went and left to join Ozzy, he actually came back and did a show with Quiet Riot while he was still in Ozzy's band.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, one thing that it must have been a really challenging decision for Randy because he was such good friends with Kevin DuBrow. I mean, that's one thing I think we did a good job in showcasing, that they had a real bond. But one thing also we brought out was that there was a lot of difficulties with songwriting, and I don't think Randy felt like he could. I think Kevin had a real sense on the way in which he wanted the songs to sound like, and Randy, I think, was just a more advanced musician and was trapped in a situation where he couldn't write the music he wanted to. And when he got into, when he got in with Ozzy, I think he was able to really break that out.
Well, one of the things that you saw happening, which again I wasn't aware of until I saw the film, is that by the end, and one of the reasons why he probably figured, what the hell, let me take a shot with Ozzy, and he admittedly was never a Black Sabbath fan, and that's also covered in the film.
Black Sabbath.
Yeah, he was never into Sabbath. So for him to go with this guy who, again, was completely at rock bottom, Ozzy was at that time, it was a leap of faith for Randy to leave a band that was so established and was his thing, going into Ozzy. Of course, it paid off and it made sense, but in the end there, Quiet Riot, because they were so frustrated without being able to get a record deal and doing this great business in Southern California, they were really reaching at straws. The punk thing was happening. Okay, let's try to make a punk song. The disco thing was happening. They actually made a disco song. I never knew any of that. I mean, they were really throwing darts at that point in desperation to try to get signed. And once a band starts doing that, and you leave your base and you leave the type of music that you're true to, I think that's when it's really you're really done, because you're just reaching for straws.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they made a disco song,
I had no idea.
I don't even know what to say about that. But I mean, I think that was more of Kevin's personality. I think that he really just was willing to do anything to get signed. And I can understand the desperation when you're broke and you can't even pay the electricity bill because, you can't make enough money in the band. But one thing is yes, Randy was not a Black Sabbath fan, but the fact that he got in, and the other thing that I think is really interesting is the Dana Strum connection. How Dana Strum was he was the glue. He was the reason why that Randy joined forces with Ozzy.
Yes, I know Dana. He's a good friend, and I was very glad to see him be able to tell that story, because he doesn't get the acknowledgement and recognition he should for really pushing Randy to do that and physically bringing Randy to Ozzy. And I've seen and heard Dana tell that story before, and he's told it to me as well on this show. But the fact that he was in there and got to tell that story and get that acknowledgement, I thought was really, really important. One other thing, Andre, on the Ozzy period, was it just, I'm assuming that Ozzy owns all the recordings, even the stuff that Randy's on, or his camp or his label. So was it a non-starter for them to clear anything, or was it too expensive, or were they not willing to give it to you?
They weren't going to give it to me, man. And they made that very clear to me once they found out I was doing this documentary. That was the challenging part. I had to go in this on my own without their support. I tried to get their support, but they weren't having it. So, I mean, every little piece of when he joined Ozzy was very difficult to get. I mean, even from my research, the Osbournes own all, if not 99% of the live footage from that era. So I had to find a gentleman, and it took me many months, who controlled even some real basic footage of Ozzy with Randy on stage.
What do you think the reason is for them not even wanting to license you a clip? Do you think it's do you think they've got something cooking up their sleeves themselves? Did they not want it out? I mean, what do you I mean, not to ask you to get inside their brain, because it's very hard to figure Sharon out on some stuff, but what was the blowback you got? Was it just a dead issue, or was it exorbitant money, or was it we've got our own thing coming? I mean, what did they tell you?
I mean, I got some really interesting communication from Sharon. Not the best, friendliest stuff was coming from that side of things. I won't go into detail on that, but I can say that I find it very mysterious, but I don't know if it's, there was another documentary, a bigger budget Dakota Films documentary in 2008, 2009 that was supposed to, they did everything. They were close to getting it released, and from what I understand, I can't say this because I wasn't there, but the Osbournes wouldn't license them any music. And from the perspective of the family, it seemed to me like they weren't going to get on board anything unless the Ozzy music and the stuff with Ozzy was in that documentary. And if it's impossible to license, then you're kind of in a conundrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's not shocking to me or anyone at all that you got blowback from Sharon about this. I mean, I can imagine how difficult it was. I mean, just legally with what you did do to make sure that that was all okay and you weren't going to be able to get hit on it.
Yeah, one of these days I'll share the text messages with you. But yeah, it was very bizarre, and the reason why, as to why they didn't want a documentary out in 2008, they don't want a documentary out now, I don't know. I just don't know. But I'm not going to let it stop getting a documentary on Randy Rhoads out there. 40 years after, there's no other documentaries out there on his life, and it needed to be done and out there for the public to really put the respect into this man's legacy.
Now Kelly, Randy's brother, is in the documentary. Was the Rhoads family, was his brother and sister cooperative on this? Or are they against this? Where do they land in all of this? Because I know Kelly's in it, but I don't know if that's new footage.
No, that's not new footage. I tried to get their cooperation, and I don't need to get into the details of it all, but I don't really know. I'm hoping now that it's out there that they realize that this is a real tribute to Randy Rhoads, and it's a piece to show his legacy. But for whatever reason, I think partially because of what was going on with the Osbournes, they just couldn't get on board.
Yeah, it's hard to understand because throughout any interviews you've ever seen with Ozzy and Sharon, they all talk about how much they love Randy and how much he meant to the band, and who knows if Ozzy and his solo career would have ever taken off without the contributions of Randy and Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake and obviously Randy's playing and writing. You would think that they'd want something out there. Now, I could understand if they said, no, we've got our own thing coming and we've got this big production and we're going to, okay, then I get that. But like you said, 40 years, you're the first person to really get anything out. And regardless if people like what you've done or not, from what I've seen, and I watched the film, I think it's coming from a place of love and tribute. And given the obstacles you had, I think you did the best you could.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some, the blowback from some of the diehard Randy Rhoads fans has been, the family wasn't involved and this and that. I tried to get them involved. I did everything I could, offered them participation, everything to get them involved. But, what for whatever reason, they didn't want to be part of it, and I don't know why. It's a big mystery to me, but, I'll ask those fans out there, would you rather have nothing or a documentary that really, showcases his legacy?
What's the reaction? Now, it's out now, right? I mean, tell people how they can see this if they want to see it. It's basically a pay-per-view type of thing at this point?
Yeah, you can get it on iTunes, Vudu, Amazon. In Demand's not going to launch the rental until June, but you can buy it there. So all your digital platforms, and I'm going to have it released on DVD this fall. I don't know the exact date, through MVD. Yeah.
And what's been the reaction now that it's been out there a little bit, Andre? Is it mixed? Is it mostly positive? I mean, you said yourself, if you're a Randy fan, why wouldn't you want something out there that can be out in the marketplace finally? What are you hearing from people about it who have seen it?
I mean, I can tell you this much. there's the New York Times reviewed it and gave it a very good review, as did 3 to 4 other outlets. I'm waiting. It just got released on Friday, so a lot of the reviews don't come in for a week or two after it's released. But it's been tremendously supportive, and it seems to me like people like this documentary. I'm honestly, it's one of the iTunes bestsellers right now, and it's charting. So I think there's a very positive feedback thus far.
What's next for you, man? What do you want to work on next as far as music docs?
Well, there's 2 music projects that I'm focused on. One is an LA Guns documentary. And I got to tell you, having Tracy Guns involved in narrating the Randy Rhoads doc was amazing. He's an amazing
Yeah, we
guy.
should mention that. I forgot to mention that. Tracy's a good friend, and he did the narration. Talk about reaching out to him for that, and he's obviously a huge Randy fan.
Having him collaborate as the spokesman for this documentary is the best move ever, because he's such a fan of Randy Rhoads. He's so inspired by him, and he's himself a legend. So that was a great move. But I want to make an LA Guns documentary. That's one next move I'd like to do.
You better have a lot of footage, man. That thing's gonna have to be 4 hours with all the people who've been in that band.
Dude, I know,
They've had like 82 people in that band or something in its whole history.
Well, we'll get it done. The other thing is I'm working on a Jim Morrison project. Actually, it's a biopic. There was a book called Burn Down the Night that was Craig Stretti wrote that book. He wrote he was a co-writer with Jim Morrison on his poetry books. They're very good friends, and it's about a night out with Jim Morrison right before he joins the Doors in LA. This psychedelic, crazy, fear and loathing-ish story, but it's a true story, and I'm making a biopic about that.
All right. Well, listen, man, it's good to talk to you for a few. I learned stuff in the film. I appreciated what you did because, again, there was a lot of footage there I had not seen. It didn't bother me that the Ozzy, we all know the Ozzy music, there's footage and that period's represented, but it didn't bother me that wasn't as heavily represented, just because I'm more fascinated in the Quiet Riot period because it's what a lot of people know a lot less about. So I found that all really interesting, that storyline of them in the clubs, and I would recommend people see the film. I enjoyed it, and I wish you luck with it.
I really appreciate your support, and thanks for having me, man.
All right, good luck, Andre, and hopefully next time I get out to L.A., hopefully we'll run into each other. It'd be good to see you.
Let's have a drink. Nice meeting you, man.
Sounds good. You too, man. Good luck. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
There he goes, everybody. His name is Andre Relis, and he is the guy who made the Randy Rhoads documentary, which is out now, as you just heard, on your streaming services for, I'm sure, some fee to watch it. I don't know how much, but Randy Rhoads, Reflections of a Guitar Icon. So takeaways there. Family wasn't down with it, although his brother, who I know his brother and his sister, wonderful people. His brother is in it, but it's sourced footage. There was a documentary a while ago, which we heard about over 10 years ago, which has been aborted. He licensed some footage that was shot by a guy named Ron Sobel, that he had a bunch of archival stuff. He was Quiet Riot's photographer back in the day. To no surprise at all, it sounds like the Osbourne camp not only wouldn't give him a second of audio, but threatening texts, as he said. I don't know. Like, I understand people wanting to protect their property, if you will, music, image, likeness, what have you. But it is crazy when you think about the impact that Randy Rhoads has had on so many people, that this is the first thing, authorized or unauthorized, that has come out when there's been so many stop-starts and so many attempts at doing stuff. And by the way, this was done, as far as put to bed, late enough that it is covered in this, that Randy went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So there, at the very end of the film, it shows that happened. Now, they don't have footage of Tom doing that induction, because I'm sure they couldn't clear that either. But it just gives you some insights on how challenging it is to make these documentaries. There's so many people that wonder about docs and why did this come out? Why did this not come out? Whatever. It's very challenging because even if you have the best of intentions, every bit of footage, every bit of audio, every photo, if you put up a still photo on the screen, that all has to not only be credited, but cleared, meaning whoever owns it, whoever took it, has to sign off, and if they want money, you have to pay them. So you can imagine, even just trying to do 90 minutes on something, when you start breaking it down and I want to use that photo, well, who took it? Who owns it? Tracing all those lines back. Hey, I got to spend X amount. Okay, you want 500 for this, you want 100 for that, you want 1,000 for that. I mean, it's just daunting. I am a huge fan, as you guys know, of any sort of documentaries. But I couldn't, in my wildest dreams, think, and I've worked on many of them from a consultant standpoint, narration, whatever. I'm working on several right now, actually, behind the scenes stuff, in front of the camera stuff. But I would never want to be the person or the company or the guy who is directing, editing, where it all lands on, because it's nuts. It's just, you're just chasing your tail. And then if you want to do new interviews, who wants to be paid? Who doesn't? Who will do it for free? Who wants this? The politics of it, who else is in it? I will do it. I won't do it. My man, it's nuts. I mean, there's so many of them, and many of them are good. And even one like this that is kind of unauthorized, like I said, I enjoyed. But I don't envy the people that have to put them together and work on them, because it's got to be nothing but drama every turn.